Hello, my friend. In this video, I'm going to thoroughly go over Patreon's plans and pricing and all the fees that are associated with being a creator on Patreon. So if you are an artist or a musician that wants to get started with Patreon, you know exactly what you're signing up for. Before I continue on to this, I wanted to let you know that I have also created an article on this topic, as you can see right here. So if you would like to follow along, or if you simply prefer the written word format, you can simply Google Patreon pricing best friends club. So with that out of the way, let's jump right into it. So Patreon has 3 different plans available to creators, all that have no monthly upfront fees or any kind of sign up costs, anything on like a monthly basis like that. Instead, Patreon will take 5% to 12% of the monthly income that you earn on Patreon, in addition to any standard payment processing fees from like credit card companies and PayPal, that kind of stuff. So instead of a upfront monthly fee, you are only paying when you make money on Patreon. So the idea is Patreon takes a cut of your earnings instead of charging a monthly fee, and you never directly pay them for use of their platform. I should mention that the additional fees that you have to pay, so the payment processing fees, that kind of stuff, they can actually take anywhere between an additional 1% to an additional 5% or even more of what you earn per patron on the Patreon membership platform. And we're going to dive a lot more into that and know all about these additional fees that could add up in this video. So just sit tight and we'll get through that. So again, although Patreon is free to sign up for and get started, any creator planning on using Patreon will need to pay creator and payment processing fees, in addition to any costs associated with delivering whatever you're going to be offering to your patrons. You never have to pay these fees directly, and instead will be paying these fees by having them automatically deducted from your payout on a monthly basis. So essentially, if you earn no money on Patreon, then you pay nothing to Patreon, which is kind of nice when you're getting started. So the Patreon fees can be easily divided into 2 main categories. The first is the Patreon creator fees, and this is a percentage of the monthly income that you earn on Patreon based on the plan that you're on, which we'll dive into in a moment, and this is paid out to Patreon. The second is the payment processing fees, and this is a percentage and flat rate of each transaction based on which tier your patron chooses, what currency they pay in, how they choose to make the payment, and this is automatically paid out to the payment processing company. In addition to this, again, make sure that you keep in mind that you will need to naturally have to pay any costs associated with actually delivering on whatever you're going to be offering in the different membership tiers. So this will be things like cameras if you need it, video editing software if you need it, paying for people to do video editing software if that's what you need. If you're going to be offering merch, you're obviously going to have to pay those costs, which makes a lot of sense. So now let's dive into Patreon's plans, and more specifically these creator fees that they charge. So again, Patreon creator fees are a percentage of the monthly income you earn on Patreon that is paid directly to Patreon. The percentage that you pay is based on which Patreon plan you are on, and the percentage is calculated based on any payment that's processed excluding any kind of sales tax. Patreon calls these fees a platform fee and describes it as a percentage of any membership payment that has been processed successfully. So here is a breakdown of the 3 different Patreon plans available to you, what features you get, as well as what these actual platform fees are. So the very first one is Patreon's Lite plan. This charges you 5% of the monthly income that you earn on Patreon and gives you very, very basic features, such as being able to create a Patreon page and having some basic communication tools to communicate with anybody that signs up for your Patreon. The next is Patreon's Pro plan, which charges you 8% of the monthly income you earn on Patreon and also gives you the ability to create the individual membership tiers and get analytics for how people are actually engaging with your Patreon. And lastly is Patreon's Premium plan, and this charges you 12% of the monthly income you earn on Patreon, and in addition to everything you get in the previous plans, you also get the ability to add merch for memberships and create team accounts. And there's a couple of other small things, but I think those are the most important. So how can you choose a Patreon plan for your individual project that you want to be working on here? So after reviewing the above Patreon plans, it can quickly become clear that you need to join at least the Pro or Premium plan to make the most out of the Patreon platform. Although the creator fees are the lowest, the main appeal for Patreon, the ability to create and charge for multiple membership tiers, it's just not available in that light plan. It's also worth mentioning again that you are not charged any upfront or setup fees, which means that you can get started with any of the plans that Patreon is available and not have to pay anything until you are actually earning income directly from Patreon. So it's for all of these reasons that I just mentioned that I'd recommend starting with the Pro plan so that you can fully build out your membership with tiers and only consider upgrading to the premium plan once you're earning some income from Patreon and feel like you need the additional features. So you can select the Pro plan, build out the membership tiers as you're kind of envisioning it, kind of launch your Patreon program, project, whatever, how you're going to view it. Once the money's coming in, that's when you kind of make new decisions and decide where you want to go from there. So after the creator fees, those platform fees, the next thing that we're going to want to discuss is the payment processing fees. And this is where things can get a little bit fluid and kind of annoying. So Patreon's payment processing fees are a percentage and flat rate of each transaction that is to be paid out to the payment processing company that your patron uses to make their payment. There's also some nuances to this, so let's dive into this. Patreon describes these fees as the cost of transferring funds from your patrons over to you, and these fees are meant to cover the costs of processing payments, managing recurring billing cycles for your patrons, recovering any declined payments, as well as fighting off fraud. These processing fees are based on which tier your patron chooses, what currency they pay in, and how they choose to make their payment. For example, a patron paying in US dollars will be charged 2.9% and 30 cents if their payment is over $3. So if they're on a membership tier that you've created that's over $3, or you will be charged 5% and 10%. You'll be charged 5% and 10 cents if their payment is $3 or less. So if they're on a membership tier that you've created that is $3 or less. In addition to this, there are some additional fees that you should know that are kind of in the realm of these payment processing fees. And you will need to pay these off automatically. It's deducted from your earnings if you want to use Patreon to process the payments for your membership platform. So first is international PayPal fees. You'll need to pay a 1% surcharge for any payment made from a patron that is using PayPal from anywhere outside of the United States. Next is conversion fees. You will need to pay a currency conversion fee of 2.5% on any payments made by patrons that are in a currency other than what you set as your payout currency. So if you're in the US and you want to get paid in the US, but me as a Canadian, I choose to join your Patreon using Canadian dollars because patrons are allowed to choose whichever currency they want. You're going to have to pay the 2.5% conversion fee to have that money converted from Canadian to US when you are requesting your payout. Next is banking fees. You'll need to pay any fees that your bank, PayPal, or Payoneer account charges you for moving funds to you from your Patreon creator balance, and these fees are not shown in your creator earnings dashboard in Patreon. So essentially, as you have new patrons join your membership, you'll be accumulating a payout balance that you can pay out at the end of the month, which I'll dive into a little bit shortly in this video. And if there's any fees for moving that out, bank fees, that kind of stuff, essentially, you will need to pay that. And lastly, taxes. You'll need to be paying any taxes associated with the income you earn based on where you live. And in particular, Patreon is legally required to collect the VAT, the VAT, from the payment of any patrons that reside in the European Union. And altogether, when you put this all together, the additional fees can take anywhere from an additional 1% to 5% or more even away from what you earn per patron payment on the Patreon membership platform. It's definitely to keep in mind. It's not going to be for each patron, but as you can see, it really depends on your situation, your patron situation, all those kind of things. And then one thing I did want to go over is content creation fee. So obviously there are the general pricing and fees that you need to do to be on the Patreon platform, but obviously you're going to need to deliver on something, right? So in addition to the creator and payment processing fees that you pay through Patreon, again, keep in mind that you will naturally have to pay for the costs associated with actually delivering on whatever you offer in your different membership tiers. When planning your very own Patreon, it can be a good idea to first plan out the different tiers that you would like to offer and make sure you clearly figure out how much it will cost you in both time and money to fulfill those different tiers. If you've been creating content on social media and other platforms for a while now, whether it be TikTok, Instagram, anything like that, you may already have a clear idea of what it costs for you to create content, and you may already have everything you need to create that content already. However, you might be brand new to content creation, or you may already be doing content creation but simply want to kind of step up your content game for what you're offering in your different Patreon tiers. So regardless of which position you're currently in, here are some basic costs of content creation that you should be aware of. One is equipment costs, things like computers, cameras, lighting, gear, basically. Next is software costs, video editing, photo editing, anything like that. Accessory costs, tripods, stands, anything like that. Cost of goods, so if you want to give shirts, CDs, you want to print things out, other merchandise, stuff like that, you're going to obviously have to pay for those things to get them created and shipped out. And lastly is any potential outsourcing. So if you wanted to have video editors do your video content, virtual assistants to help you out with any of this stuff, there are potential costs. And ultimately, that really does dovetail nicely into what it costs for you to create this content will ultimately depend on your budget, one, and two, what you plan on actually offering to your patrons. And lastly, before moving on, if you are new to Patreon, it can be a good idea to practice fulfilling the tiered content you plan to offer for a few months first before you actually launch your Patreon, so that you can clearly know the costs associated with it, so that you don't overpromise and underdeliver. This is a really cool idea that I got from a podcast that actually I was on not too long ago, and it's called The Blueprint. Is Patreon the blueprint for your career, something like that. But it's a pretty cool podcast episode, and I will leave the link to that below if you'd like to get some more cool ideas like this. So moving right along, does Patreon offer any free trials? I do talk about this in an additional video, so if you want to check that out, there is a link above. But essentially, they don't really offer any free trials for either creators or patrons rather. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the details of what they do offer for free, you're going to want to go ahead and check that video out above. And then finally moving on to, how does the pricing for Patreon actually work as a creator? How is this going to affect you? How is this going to look like on a month-to-month basis? So instead of upfront fees or sign-up costs for using Patreon, again, you will have to pay that 5 to 12% of the monthly income that you earn on Patreon, depending on which Patreon plan that you select, and as well as that any payment processing fees from PayPal, credit card companies, bankings, all that kind of stuff, right? And these are automatically deducted from your payout on a monthly basis. So after choosing a Patreon plan, getting your first patrons to join, and having their payments processed, you will be able to receive your payout minus the creator and payment processing fees on a monthly basis. Because Patreon takes a cut of your earnings, you never actually need to pay Patreon directly to use the platform. Although Patreon processes payments on the 1st of each month, they recommend that all creators wait until the 5th to allow Patreon some time to recover any declined payments first. Once there is money available to be paid out to you, you are able to manually pay out your balance or set up automatic transfers to pay out your balance for you on the 5th of each month. So essentially what this means is, on a monthly basis, Patreon only costs money each month if you're a creator, and if you're a creator specifically that is actually earning money on the platform. And that really, I think, pretty thoroughly covers what it costs to run a Patreon. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, make sure you like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Other than that, good luck on building out your very own membership, and I will see you in the next video, my friend. Have a good one.